Let's talk herd. Do you ask people their intention when they come to you? Is it focused around riding, or would you say there's other people come with other goals or aims with their horse?
I feel like people come to me when they've hit a space of they understand that having a deeper connection and relationship and partnership with your horse is going to just feel better, but they don't know what to do about it, and they've lost that connection. They don't, the confidence is sort of gone. They know that there's not a lot of trainers they can go to get this piece, and so they start sort of searching for what it is that's going to fill in that gap. And I feel like those are the people that end up finding me, because I think I do fill in the gap between getting the results that they want performance wise, and having the relationship piece at the same time, because I think sometimes people feel like they can't have both, that they have to sacrifice one for the other. And I feel like the more you lean into the relationship and surrender the timelines and the agendas, those things actually come faster. But it's the getting people to surrender the agenda and the timelines. It's just like manifesting. It's like, what you want, you type in the address into the GPS, and then you just let the GPS tell you where to go. You follow the breadcrumbs. You're not going, what do we do? Do we turn left? Do we turn right? But people, that's what people do, right? They get so hung up in each little thing, and why is this taking so long? And this doesn't look like other things, and it doesn't even look like we're getting to where we need to be getting. And so when you get people to just surrender to the process, then things happen much more quickly for them.
So how does that process look? Like, you start with this, I'm just kind of offering this as an idea, but so if you start with the tension and you're working to unwind that, like, how long would it take? Can you say that, really, to move on to riding and like the process of training?
Yeah, it depends on the person and their willingness to just, the people that are actually farther down the I'm about to quit road, actually, because they surrender faster, get back to things faster. And so the process that I take people through, it's just the awareness, and the understanding. So when I look at tension, I really want to go back further, and I go, why is there tension here? There's tension there, and I can release it. But if I don't get to the core reason why the tension is there, or the story that's creating the tension, whatever that is, if I don't get to that first, then it doesn't matter how much body work and how much release and how much stuff you do. It'll always come back until you address the root issue, and it's the same thing with, the belief systems for people. If you don't go straight to that and shift that, then, that stuff will always pop up in everything you do.
Do you ever find that tension comes from the horse's lifestyle? Or would you say it's always something to do with the relationship itself with the people?
Yeah, I think it's all of it, which is what gets a little overwhelming for people. We have a podcast I'm doing with a friend of mine, Shaylee, and she's an animal communicator. And this comes up a lot in her sessions, where people will say, well, the horse wants to be out with friends, or it wants more space to move and make its own decisions. And, people get really bummed out about that, because they're like, well, I'm at a boarding stable and I don't have ways to make that different, if the resources aren't there to shift that for them. And there are some, little solutions that we do talk about, but, it is really around the ideal lifestyle for them is to be able to be going out, around friends, having, something that's close as you can get to what they would want to be doing. And I always look at the relationship, like if you're in a relationship with another person, whether it's family or a friend or, a spouse, it's I would split it into like 4 pieces. And those 4 pieces are, I get to go do my own thing, without whatever, my
Yeah.
own time, my own space, and that person gets to go and do their own thing. And then, the other fourth of that is I go do what the horse wants to do with them, whether it's hand grazing or, walking or just sitting with them in the pasture
Yeah.
or the turnout, just sharing space like they would do with each other. And then, the other quarter of the time, then we're doing what, I would want to do with them, which would be, riding or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
But having that balance there is really, I think, what creates a partnership where everyone wants to be involved.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a nice way of looking at it. Yeah, it makes it a bit easier. So, where does giving the horse a choice come into your approach? Because that's quite, like you said, it's becoming more of an issue with people. They're becoming more aware of that as a thing in itself. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I feel like people confuse that with lack of boundaries. When you're doing and working in like a conscious horsemanship type of modality, it's making sure people understand that there are rules of engagement and they do go both ways, where if I'm sharing space with this horse, I'm asking things of them, um, then they get to express themselves so long as it doesn't physically harm my body, and I get to express myself so long as it doesn't physically harm their body. So they can say they don't like something, they can kick out, they can do all the things as long as there's space and there's no physical contact made.
Mm,
And same thing for me. I can be frustrated and I can be confused and I can, have all of these emotions and I can own them, but I can't physically harm the horse because of them.
yeah.
So the boundaries are a big thing. And people being able to express and create a boundary from a place of neutrality is a really big thing. So not doing it because you're afraid, not doing it because you're
Mm,
mad, because people will sense that, especially when you're dealing with other people.
yeah.
It's understanding why you're creating the boundary, feeling good about creating the boundary, and then upholding that boundary from a good feeling place, a place of I'm keeping myself safe, I'm keeping you safe, while still being able to hold this container for you to be able to tell me how you feel about this. Um, Little things that you can do for them in choice is just slowing down the grooming process.
Mm,
I have a conscious grooming practice that I invite people to do, where most people don't realize that how much your physical touch is starting out even the day with resistance or defensiveness.
yeah.
People are so unaware of how powerful the touch can be because we're just so
Mm,
used to seeing people throw their halter on, go get the brush, you brush the horse off, you saddle them up, everything's happening really fast. And
yeah.
meanwhile, the horse has communicated to you like 57 times how they don't like the way things are being done and they're being
Yeah.
disregarded.
Yeah.
So you're setting up your entire time you're sharing with them with you don't matter, your feelings don't matter, we're doing it this way, and here we go.
Mm,
And
yeah.
then they go out and they want self carriage and relaxation in their horse, in a partnership where that's not safe for them to have that. So the way it looks is, opening up the stall door, and holding the halter there and taking a breath there and waiting for the horse to actually be ready to engage with you instead of just going in and,
Mm,
imposing
yeah.
yourself on them. Um, or with the brushing, I invite people to take a breath in between each shift of a thing, right? So um, I call it pressing in, a lot of people don't drive stick anymore, but, press the clutch in,
Yeah.
right in between each thing before you shift gears, take a breath, press the clutch in
Yeah.
before you put the saddle on, you put the pad on, check in. You good? Are we feeling okay today about that? Cool. These little tiny conscious breaks in between each thing make a huge difference to the
Mm,
horse.
yeah.
It allows them to feel seen and to feel heard, and that alone brings a lot of softness into their body. And if you're talking, like I said, if you're talking about inviting a horse to have self-carriage and carry themselves and do all these things that you think they want, but the entire first part of you interacting with them is you completely disregarding how they feel, then you're going to be working through a lot more resistance once you get on than you would be if you just slowed down and checked in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there are days where if the, I think people disregard a lot of things with mares, their judgment around, oh, she's just crabby today, or, oh, I'm
Yeah.
like, have you ever, had, times where you're, having your own cycle and you feel like, that's usually what you feel
Yeah,
like,
it's so
stop,
true.
like, no, you wouldn't want someone, getting on your back or, having your personal trainer ask you to stay in a plank for 3 minutes. You know what I mean? It's like, this stuff is all valid
Yeah.
and we invalidate them constantly, and it's
Yeah.
really kind of gross when you think about it.
Mm.
Um, and that's something that we were actually going to talk about on our, what is going on for them and why are we labeling and disregarding them so much, and on those days, like I have a mare here, her cycles are incredibly uncomfortable for her. And when I go
Mm.
out, I can tell the day before she gets really emotional and she gets really attached to
Yeah.
all the other horses all of a sudden. And
Yeah.
I go, oh, I recognize it. And we work with it. And no, I don't get on her and ride her and ask her to carry me around and,
Yeah.
pick herself up and do this stuff. I'm like, no, she gets to go out in the pasture and just do her thing. She gets some Banamine if she's really uncomfortable. Like it's to that point where she'll look like she's colicking.
Yeah.
And we just
Yeah.
work around it. And it doesn't mean you get more behind. Your training doesn't suffer. It's, you're honoring this entire other being's um, experience on this
Yeah.
planet. And
Yeah.
we have so much control over everything that they do. That's our responsibility if we're going to, expect these things performance wise from these horses, and we need to start honoring like their bodies and what is creating that performance for us. And so I think it's really about shifting the perspective of that stuff. And I don't, just because I've given a horse 3 or 4 days off because they're uncomfortable doesn't mean their training is lost by any means.
No.
If anything, it's better because they feel good, they feel 100% when you go to ask them for this stuff, and then they also feel seen and heard and safe in a partnership with you, so they're willing to do more for you because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really true. Do you find that over time you're becoming like there's more space happening? Like you're kind of, because I'm just talking about my own experience that, I mean, I did decide that I didn't want to continue with normal or any kind of training. I wanted it to be a fully reciprocal dialogue, which kind of changes everything to a certain degree, but well, to a large degree. But do you find that you're still evolving, like you're still changing? Because it seems like the more we introduce choice and listening, the less the actual horsemanship has a place. And I don't know if that's just my own experience, because I did want to follow that slightly different path, like a more of a dialogue. But yeah, I just find it's just an interesting question. That do you think that you will become,
Mm-hmm.
that you'll continue in a way on that path? And because there is a certain aspect of it that horses can feel, and there's nothing wrong with this, but they do want to please us, and that's great. But then do they really enjoy it fully? And do you question yourself like that? Or is it all relatively straightforward?
Yeah, I think it just depends on the horse. My particular horses are very bred to work. And they are very unhappy physically and mentally when they're not working. And so
Yeah.
it's an individual thing for sure. I feel like I learned that lesson because I was in a place where I was overwhelmed with information. I was like, I don't know everything about the body. I don't know everything about the mind. How can I do this? I'm not, and you will get into a space of overwhelm and like paralysis. And
Mm,
there's a lot of people out there that will really preach you have to know everything about the body before you should touch the body, or it's irresponsible for you to be, doing body work unless you know everything. Like, that's not reality. And
Yeah.
I
No.
feel like you can be mindful and conscious when you're doing stuff. I feel like a lot of it is trusting yourself. I think we get real
Yeah.
hung up on being certified in things and getting formal training, and it's like we all
Mm.
are tapped in to a level of
Yeah.
connection with each other, and you're gonna know when you're doing something with a horse if it feels good to them or not, if you're paying attention and really listening to them.
Yeah.
Um, and so for my own particular horses, they're very high energy. They love working. And I know that because
Mm.
when I get on them and I ask them for things, it's like they always want to give more. And it's from a place of
Mm.
relaxation. They're never tense or stressed out. It's like when I
Yeah.
put my mare in particular, it's just like exploding with this energy. And like, and when you ask her for stuff, it's like she tries harder, and you can tell when she's done, she's just like has this, face
Yeah.
on. And well, I'll
Yeah.
see, but I've also haven't done a lot with her. She's the one that's been my greenest horse because she was the youngest that I had, and I spent more time on her older brother performance wise. Um, and he
Yeah.
got pushed a little harder. He got sent to a trainer for 3 months to go get put on cattle. And I saw how he was when he came back. And I love this trainer.
Mm.
He's a great friend of mine, but very much in the performance world, pushed really hard because I think he knew I
Yeah.
was going through a hard time and wanted to create this really amazing horse for me when I came to pick him up. And so he did
Yeah.
get pushed a little fast. And I pulled back, and all of that stuff is, all the stuff I did with him when he was young is still there, and he can still go work cows. But because I
Mm.
don't drill it into him constantly, he's actually better now than he was before. But those are the
Mm.
things that there horses out there that would rather just, go down the trail, or would rather just be
Yeah.
left alone in the pasture for sure. I think they each have their own thing. Some of it's genetics. I think some of it's their experience doing the stuff. If the horses have had something drilled into them, it'll create a space where they're resistant to it and hate it. If the arena has been a place of a
Mm.
lot of like arguments, then we're not going to want to go to the arena. But also, you can shift that stuff, which I think that there's a lot of value in that. Going to the places that they
Mm.
had kind of a
Yes.
preconceived like tension around, and making it a place that is not that, can be really beneficial, and unwinding really old patterns for them that are kind of stuck in them. um,
Definitely.
Had a couple horses come into training that were from auction. They had picked them up. We don't know if they were started. We don't know what they'd been through. And I do these sessions, and they're called mirror sessions. And
Right.
I take people, horse and non-horse people, through a meditation, different somatic release through the body with music and breath and
Okay.
movement. And the
Wow.
horses are just loose out there. And I've put those horses in those sessions, and they actually, for the first couple, will just stay away. But once they realize that no one's asking anything of them and they're just able to share space, then I've seen them really step into a place where they can come in and actually
Mm.
really facilitate the session, with touch and their own interactions. And they
Yeah.
start to get really tapped into, and they know these horses, the ones that I use are ones that I know are really good about clearing their own, stuff that they take on from these sessions. Some I don't use.
Okay.
And ironically, the ones that my two that really like to work and are really in that mindset don't do great in the mirror sessions because they tend to take a lot of the stuff on.
Ah, okay.
But I have a few that I know, like in the moment, they'll clear and they'll roll and they'll shake it off, and but they'll tap right into, and I've seen them do it right into where people have pain and tension. Um,
Mm.
and I've been in my own cranial sessions. I have a friend who does that. She'll bring her table, and I'll have stuff going on for me, and I'll get on the table and just be in the herd. Or we've done it in a smaller space, and then we've done it once in the arena.
Yeah.
And they go straight to those spots, and I don't know how. Sometimes they'll work on them. I use my personal horses,
Mm.
and I did have a really big spot in my shoulder that was a very old, um, clearing that needed to happen. And my mare came in and worked on that spot with my cranial lady, and she just died. She was like, "This
Wow.
is crazy." But 2 days later, had a
Yeah.
huge abscess on her leg, and I was like,
That's amazing.
"It's
Yeah.
like I don't know that they're meant to be doing this work because they take it on, and
Wow.
so I don't know. I'm just real careful with the ones I choose, for that stuff, and I haven't dove deep enough into that, but
Yeah.
um,
That's,
probably me stepping in and facilitating, a cord cutting session for them or clearing more stuff for them in between would be something that would allow them to be able to do those sessions. But
mm,
stuff I forget, and I'm always like fluxing and going back and forth between all the stuff that I've learned. So
yeah. Yeah. That sounds really amazing, though. And she probably was really like happy to do that for you as well.
yeah,
No, but I love the way that
yeah,
you say that your horses love to work, and because I can really hear the energy there in your, and it makes me really believe that I think that horses come to, like, we attract the horses into our lives who are really right for doing whatever particular project that we want to do and whatever gives us joy. And so what is it that you do? Like, what's your performance when you say a performance horse? Because I'm coming from Europe, so I've got a different like take on all of that. Are you talking about reining? Is that what you do with the horses?
the horses that come to me, my particular horses do rein cow horse. So they'll do the reining,
Okay.
the fence work, and then the cutting where they cut just the individual cow. I have
Okay.
dressage horses. I have 3-day eventing horses that come. Um, usually they're sent to me by other trainers, where they're like,
Yeah.
we don't know what to do. Um, a lot of trainers don't know how to help the person, and I think that's where the disconnect
Hmm.
comes, where they're like, it's the person, and I don't have those tools, so here you
Hmm.
go. And um,
Okay.
so they'll come to me for a little while, but individually, my passion is rein cow horse. But performance to me is, anything. It's even if it's just I want to go into the arena and do a dressage pattern and never go to a show. It's,
Yeah.
I feel like it's anything that is a goal you have that, for you, people think, well, I have to forego all of these goals I have
Hmm.
because I want to work on the relationship and my horse probably doesn't want to do it. And I was like, that's not necessarily true.
No.
Because if you're having fun, they're most likely having fun.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
but if people are stressed out and worried and doing, asking things of their horse and they're having to push through a bunch of tension, then you're probably not having that great of a time, neither are they.
Yeah.
Um, but when we do talk about like performance stuff, whether it's reining or your spins or your rollbacks or dressage, and you're talking about like a half pass or lead changes or whatever it is, none of that stuff is really that hard to get from your horse. Like none of it is that complicated. What makes it complicated is that you're having to push through tension and resistance.
Yeah.
That's what
Absolutely.
makes all of that stuff hard. If
Hmm.
you didn't have resistance in any of it, then you know.
Yeah.
And so what you're really working on when you're working on the relationship and you're working on that partnership, you're working on the tension. You're working on when you ask them for something, they don't feel the need to protect themselves because if they're
Hmm.
confused or
Absolutely.
they're worried about something, they know you'll slow down
Yeah.
and, and start over or, go back a step. And you see a lot of trainers when the horse gets confused, they push harder and it's really backwards.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it make that all is exactly how I feel about it. And I think it is. It's a pity, really, that quite a lot of people feel that they have to back right off doing anything
Right.
because they think there isn't a way of, there isn't a way of working together. Because I think really the horse, like I said, I think the horses that you attract into your life, they really are the right ones for, fulfilling your desire as well. That is their, you share that together.
Yeah, and I feel like I always say there's like soul contracts, right? So they come, they choose you, you choose them.
Yeah,
There's deeper learnings that will come through these lessons that they provide
absolutely.
to you. I don't feel like, a lot of people, how do you deal with like these lesson horses that look so miserable and they're shut down and, and these and it was hard
Mm,
for me in the beginning, but from really getting to know Shaylee, and I love the way she does her communication and stuff because it's and partly why we started the podcast was because the perspective of the horse is really not often the perspective of what the human thinks is going for them. And
That's true. Yeah.
and and remembering that they're not necessarily victims. They don't, they're not victims of us. They choose. They know who they're choosing.
Absolutely.
And so taking it out of that mindset of, oh my gosh, my poor horse, you don't want to bring in shame and guilt into it, because that doesn't help.
Yeah.
I just look at them like, people come into your lives for those lessons. The horses come into your lives for those lessons. We all choose. We've all made these choices before we're here. So yeah, I think definitely,
Yeah.
and I think when you're working towards goals and everyone in the partnership feels good about it, it's fun. It's fun to go do that stuff when there's no pressure and
Yeah. So
all of
true.
the stuff that goes along with a lot of the typical trainers. And if you're showing and stuff, there's more um, of that stuff than there's not. So I think that's why people get a little bit turned off and go, well, I can't do two things. I can't go to my trainer and go, I'm not now. I need to slow down. I'm working on a relationship.
Mm,
But I do think that's shifting. There's a lot
yeah.
more trainers here now that are working that direction, and it's not becoming something that's weird. It's just becoming something that's obvious. If you know anything about the nervous systems, and you know anything about their bodies, and you know anything about performance, and there's no reason why you wouldn't be going in this direction. It's obviously the most sustainable, and the most respectful for their bodies, and keeping that in integrity. And so it's really easy for me to defend doing it that way, because it just seems like silly to think of it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much of it is that our own energy is mirrored by the horses. So, like you say, if you feel good about what you're doing, then that's everything to the horses, isn't it? It really, mostly that's what they want, that, that they can share that place with us of just feeling good about life. Because I think that's where they are really most of the time.
Yeah, definitely.
So, do you have any plans for the future? Have you got any projects that are happening, or are you writing a book or anything like that?
Yeah, we have the master class that's running right now. I have the doors open still. I let people join when they want. We've only done one live call.
Okay.
So that's really taking people through that process. In the beginning of it, the whole first section is the awareness and the understanding, and then the acceptance, and then the integration and the boundaries. And
Mm.
it's really all about the self in the beginning, and then we integrate the horses. um, I have some really fun collaborations with live collaborations with some clinicians coming up this year that
Mm.
are going to be really fun. When you're speaking to feeling like, oh, I need to know everything to be able to do this, it's like, or you could collaborate with people that have different strengths
Yeah,
than you, and
absolutely.
create
Yeah.
these clinics and experiences for people that they get really transformative shifts that get to take place. um, a lot of that is you have to drop a lot of ego.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why some trainers don't do it.
Yeah.
But I choose to collaborate with people that have that deep understanding and are really
Mm.
aligned with
Yeah.
the way this stuff is.
Yeah.
um, and then the third thing that we sort of have is this podcast that we've started. um, it's myself and Shaylee Evans, and we really just pick topics that are common things that come up with her communication sessions. And
Mm.
I think a lot of things that people hear from their horses, it sort of bumps up against their beliefs and their identity, and they're like, oh
Yeah.
gosh, like, do I want to
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Or once they do know, they're like, well, I don't even know what to do about this. And so we thought, well, the perfect combination to be able to give people those tools and ideas about what you can do. Um, and so that's been really fun. That's been a really fun collaboration as well. So those are the main things.
Yeah. That sounds great. So, what would you say is the main issue that you see with people and their horses? What's the most common thing that comes up?
I feel like it's just that disconnection of communication, and that really just comes from people being so disconnected from themselves
Mm.
and their own bodies. And it creates a disconnect in relationships across the board, not just with their horses. So I think my main focus is really like reconnecting people back to their true
Mm.
selves so that they can really connect with everyone around them, not just the horses.
It's a really fascinating journey. And do you feel like things are changing now in the horse world? Like there's more people becoming aware and you can actually see the difference when you go to competitions or.
I can't speak to the competition space. I stepped away from that piece when both my horses, well, my gelding has cysts and navicular changes. And so, in order for me to keep him sound and keep his body in integrity, I had to promise him that I wouldn't
Okay.
show him. But I actually think that might have shifted because I made that commitment to
Yeah.
him. Um, I had a belief that in order for me to be a legitimate trainer, I needed to go show
Mm.
and prove to people that I could do that
Yeah.
piece of it. Um, and then he went lame, and there's a whole story around that. But it was that moment with him where I promised him I wouldn't show him, and actually immediately he was sound,
Mm.
and haven't had to inject him. I haven't, he's barefoot right
Yeah.
now. But I know if my, that intention, and I think that was the lesson that he was coming to, bring to me, because that's why I bought him. He's bred really well. He's super athletic. He's incredibly talented. And I know if I push him that hard, he'll go lame. So I had to make a choice of what am I preserving here? And so I take him to a lot of clinics and we go do long trail
Mm.
rides. And, I'll go take him to work cows once in a while because it's fun for him.
Yeah.
But the push piece is not there anymore. Um, so I don't know. I think the performance world has a ways to
Mm.
go still. Um, but I think there's a definite shift within just the general horsemanship practices. Um, a lot of the work that Celeste is doing. She does a method called movement method. Wow, it's like brain gone. Um, where she really talks about the development of that through into performance. And I think what's cool about her stuff is while it's not necessarily just body work, it's groundwork done in a way where you're focused on developing the horse correctly. And I think it's a really good
Mm.
filler
Yeah.
piece between between strictly this is where I want my horse's head and body, where it educates you enough on what's happening and why you want your horse's body there, how to build it up really slowly, and then when you put all the pieces together. So I think, different things like that, different people doing different things. And she's one of the people I'm collaborating with at a clinic, um,
Mm.
where that stuff is shifting. And, we have a lot of vets coming to that clinic. We have a lot of trainers coming to our clinic. And so I think that's where it's sort of starting, right? And then that'll trickle out and spread from there. And I know that there are a couple people in that group that are showing. So I think that it will get there, but I think it's definitely probably going to be the last
Mm.
place that it lands.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it's important that people like you are working with people who compete and that it's getting right in there into the mainstream because it's kind of easy to get secluded, and you don't really see people like that anymore. So,
Yeah, and I think social media helps because you can look around and
yeah,
see.
definitely. Yeah. Well, it's been really lovely talking to you, Amber. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been very nice to meet you. Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
No, you're very welcome. Yeah, is there anything else you would like to say?
I don't think so. I think that I talked a lot. I feel like I talk a lot. No, I think the main thing for people, the main thing for people is like when you're shifting, the way you're seeing these things and the perspectives of, and starting to see things different, is just to be really kind to yourself.
Yeah,
And just look for those
yeah.
resources. Social media is, it's a kind of a crazy place, but also there's a lot, a lot of space to be in community with other people that are like that, so you don't feel so alone. Um,
Yeah,
and so,
so true.
just in the progress of learning and exploring, then, if you start to realize, oh my gosh, I was doing all this stuff and it was really terrible. Um,
Mm,
we've all been there, you're just where you're at, you only know what you know. And so, just being really kind to
yeah,
yourself through the process.
yeah. I think that's one of the main things as humans, that we're so judgmental of each other and ourselves. And
Hmm.
there's just no need for that, because everything that you're doing is guiding you to what you're becoming. And you can't really not, you can't deny what you went through, because that's how you changed. And so it's, yeah, it is that. I think everybody just needs to be a bit kinder to themselves and to everyone else, really, and not get, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, because I think it's, we're all awakening. And I think it's important to realize as well that just because what your own project is different, it's not the only thing, and it's not the right thing. It's just offering. You can offer just a different pathway, and that's what's so beautiful
Hmm.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
sounds like what you're doing is really, it's really valuable for people, and it's just, helping them to find a way of actually achieving what they want to do with horses. Do you find that anybody sort of changes as they go along? Like they have a goal at the beginning, and then they become less attached to that, and they move into a different place with their horse.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like people come in thinking they need to accomplish XYZ. Usually there's a belief behind it.
Hmm.
Sort of like my thing with the showing, right? There was a belief that in order for me to be looked at and respected by my peers, I needed to also prove to them that I can take on more than problem horses or more than just starting horses, where I could go, I know how to do all the things. And I feel like that was just a belief that I had. And it got to the point where I just don't need to prove myself. And while I think I
Exactly.
still want to do that, I still think it would be really fun. And while I'm not in the space to do it right now, um, I do feel like I will have a horse in the future that I'll get to do that stuff with.
Hmm.
But it's not for any reason other than I think it would be really fun. Whereas before there was a lot more pressure around it. And
Yeah.
I think that's why I bumped up against resistance around it. So yeah, I feel like that piece
Yeah.
is, it shifts. It just becomes less of a priority.
Hmm. Yeah. It's so important, I think, to be able to come to that place where you're just enjoying what you're doing. And there is so much, we put so much pressure on ourselves about, that horses have to have a purpose. And it's not that there's anything wrong with them having a purpose and doing things, but it's the reasons behind it, really, that are so important, like you say.